Hey guys, it's JP. Don't forget to find us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Spark in the Valley. We're also on YouTube, so like, share, and subscribe to get the hottest, newest content.
Spark in the Valley. Spark in the Valley.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Hopefully it's not good night for you yet, maybe on the way, but you have decided to turn on a Spark in the Valley.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. You've stumbled upon quite the interesting conversation. We're located in the beautiful heart of the valley. I call it the friendly city, Athens, Tennessee. I am joined by amazing voices, minds, and faces. We have
I'm Alex Sharp.
I'm JP Vasquez.
I'm Cody Hensley.
I'm Julius Johnson, and as already stated, we are Spark in the Valley. We are moving forward on our conversation from last week.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify some things. I was asked a couple of questions, and I didn't really know the answers. One of those was, when did the Daughters of the Confederacy put up statues and things like that? When was their most active time? Because we knew that they had put up a lot of statues. And so I started looking into it, and I actually came across a lot of stuff, and a lot of it was there was a lot of stuff about Tennessee. And I thought, okay, well, that might be a good conversation for us to kind of continue and talk about and kind of see what you guys think about this, because it's kind of wild in a lot of ways. So what we're talking about is the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which is a group that started in 1894, and it's considered a white Southern women's heritage group. And in a lot of ways, in the early 1900s, they were essentially kind of the female version of the Ku Klux Klan, but they work in a different way, right? So they don't have the violence that we see from the KKK.
Wow.
But they support that violence. And so there's a really fascinating podcast that I suggest everybody listen to. It's called White Lies. And they talk a lot about this. And that's initially where my information came from when we were talking last week. Just talking about, they talk a lot about the lost cause, which is this idea that essentially that the Confederacy was just and heroic in what they were doing, and that they were fighting for states' rights, not necessarily slavery. But of course, we all know, or at least I say that, but we don't all know that. A big proportion of us know that that's not true, that the Confederacy fought to keep slavery legal.
Right.
I mean, that was really what it came down
The
to.
focus of
It was
it.
in their actual
Right.
document that stated why the Confederacy was fighting this war.
Right.
So we know that's true, but ironically, something like 40, let me look, I actually have it right here. There's a CNN article called "There Are Certain Moments in U.S. History When Confederate Monuments Go Up." And they talk about different times that these memorials are going up as, really they're symbols of hate, but talking about why they're erected and things like that. But it's talking about the different spikes. And, oh, no, this isn't the article I'm thinking of. The one I'm thinking of is the Washington Post article that talks about, initially it was talking about, you remember when John Kelly, the chief of staff, talked about Robert E. Lee being an honorable man?
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all remember that. That was 2017. It was a while ago. There's been a lot of things that have happened between then and now. But he was talking about it, and a lot of historians had a really big problem with that because they thought he downplayed the real cause of the war, which was slavery. But they actually did some studies or did polls to see what people thought, public opinion research polls talking about how many people believed that the Civil War's main cause was slavery and how many thought that it was states' rights. And 42% said that slavery was not the main reason for the Civil War, which is a crazy percentage, guys. That's a huge amount. That's almost half the country that has been indoctrinated to think that the Confederacy was just, that they were right in what they were fighting for, which is ridiculous because they were fighting to keep slavery legal.
Right.
And so, and then they had another poll that was from 2015. It was a McClatchy-Maris poll. And they asked, was slavery the main reason for the Civil War or not? And just over half, 53%, said that it was. And 41% said that it was not. So really, it was almost exactly the same as this poll that was taken several years before that said 42% thought that slavery was not the main reason for the Civil War. So it's kind of crazy. But one of the reasons that that is so pervasive is the Daughters of the Confederacy. They have had this campaign for a long time, for over 100 years, that has fought to teach the lost cause ideology. They didn't invent it, but they are extremely important in spreading the idea of the lost cause ideology. And it's one of the biggest ways that they did that was by putting up Confederate monuments. They've put up over 700 of them.
Wow.
And there are even states, because they're a nonprofit technically, there are states that are giving them money. Like their headquarters is in Virginia, and they've been given $1.6 million since 1996 to maintain Confederate statues in Virginia.
Could you imagine what that would do to each like individual like commerce or economy? Like just goes directly back, into like the appreciation of the situation instead of it like being this, subservient statue that's like looming over.
Well, that's meant to intimidate, right? So the Confederate statues, the majority of Confederate statues went up during Jim Crow era, which was in the 1910s, 1920s. It was about 35 years after the Civil War, 30 years after the Civil War, and that was a huge push by the UDC, the United Daughters of the Confederacy. They pretty much there's a book that's been written by historian Karen Cox, and she says UDC members aspired to transform military defeat into a political and cultural victory where states' rights and white supremacy remained intact. And that was like so much a motivating factor for them. Right. And so they put up these statues during Jim Crow era, which was the first time that we started to see black people find any kind of political power, even though it was such a small amount. Right. They put them up to try to, maintain this idea of white supremacy. And then the next big surge we see of statues being put up, Confederate statues being put up, is in the 1950s and 60s during the Civil Rights era. Right. So we know that they're put up for a specific reason, and that reason is to intimidate and to cause fear. And it's a fear tactic, or a scare tactic. It's meant to make people be frightened that thing, that idea of the Confederacy, or the idea that slavery was the right thing, should be maintained. And so I think that there's a lot to be said. But the other thing that they've done a lot of is the education, is like going into schools, and they did a lot of things with putting up murals and stuff of generals and like Confederate flags and all this kind of stuff, but also making sure that kids were being taught that states' rights was the reason behind the Civil War. And so it's actually they've have books that glorify the KKK that they have then gone on to send out and make sure that people read them, and they've published them themselves. I mean, it's really kind of wild. I got a lot of this information from an article from Salon that is called 7 Things the United Daughters of the Confederacy Might Not Want You to Know About Them.
Wow.
The organization keeps Confederate statues standing and spreads lies about America's history of slavery. And it's so true. Like, it's so pervasive and it's so sneaky. Like, they snuck in a lot of ways, like with the indoctrination of white Southern children. Like, this totally worked on my mom when we've talked about this, me having the conversation with her about Confederate statues. This was totally, and we were taught that, like I was taught that in school. It's still a very pervasive idea. But they would actually have children of the Confederacy, like a youth auxiliary essentially. And they would like essentially get children to join the UDC from that. Like,
Wow.
and they would always have children involved in the unveiling of their monuments. So they would have like a child who got to pull the cord.
Oh my gosh.
And a child who's like, then the children would form like living battle flags, and they would sing patriotic songs that were of Southern heritage and like
My
all this kind of crazy
goodness.
nonsense. And it's just really, it's really sad because they have a really backwards way of thinking about things. And one of the ways that they do that is by honoring Black people who were loyal slaves. And that's like a big part of the Lost Cause ideology, is that that slaves liked being slaves. That like there were slaves who fought for the Confederacy because they believed in the Confederacy and they believed in slavery and they liked slavery, which I think is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life.
Well, it is ridiculous, but there is, like a large majority of, unfortunately, brainwashed Black people that do support, I say majority, that's not the right word. There's a large group of Black people. You can literally just kind of just Google it, and you'll see pictures of Black people at events and things, like even today.
There's one who I was in a bunch of, so one of my best friends actually helped to get the Robert E. Lee statue taken down of Lee's Circle in New Orleans.
Okay.
And she fought for like a couple of years for them to take down several different Confederate statues, along with like a large cohort of people. It was not just her.
Right.
It was a large group of people. And she was always, there's always pictures of her at these like big protests. And there was this one Black guy who was always like motorcycled out, like dressed in leathers, but they were all like covered in Confederate statues. And he always had a gun on him and stuff. And it was like, I don't understand this kind of indoctrination. Like, I don't get it. So can you tell me why? Like, do you have any insight on that?
The best thing that I can say without getting too deep into it is that it does come from the relationship that some Black slaves had with their slave owners.
Yeah.
And if you understand the way that slaves were bred, and I'm using that term directly.
Yeah.
Slaves were bred.
Intentionally.
They bred slaves that had specific roles to play on any plantation.
And then they would pit them against each
They
other.
would pit them against
like
each
if you
other.
got to be a house slave, that was much better than being a
Right,
slave in the
the
fields.
field.
Yeah.
And among other, some other chores, that
sure.
you would have to go through.
Yeah, like if you were lucky enough to be the master's like valet or
Right,
whatever, like that's
right.
like huge.
The best example that we can see and laugh at the same time is the Django Unchained. As slapstick as it was, it still speaks a little bit of truth. Samuel
Absolutely.
Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson.
Perspective on that is, so you could have been a slave owner and not treated the people that you had in slavery poorly.
Right.
I'm sure there are plenty of examples of families that were treated well, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you were not being treated fairly as a human being. Even if you enjoyed your life as a slave, you were not given the option of anything else.
Right.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if like they liked it or not, because
It was still not
They
right.
didn't know
Yeah.
what the difference was.
Yeah.
And and it continues.
Right. Generational, right? Generational trauma is such a real thing. Like, and that, and I guess those ideas stay with you.
Yeah.
Like, there's another really good podcast called The Nod. That's really good. And they have a episode about a woman who like, owned some land and it was being taken away from her because it had been bought by her father, who was once a slave. It's like really complicated, but she's a really incredible woman, actually. It's a really,
Didn't
I'll have
they
to look
give
it up.
that land out to certain people because of slavery?
Maybe it was that. Maybe it was
something
something like that. That's
And then
how
they
she
were
ended up
going
with it.
back
And then
on that.
they were like, reneging on it. And it was like years and years later, but they had actually lived on the like slave owners' land and still had relationships with them because her father was like a sharecropper and all this kind of stuff.
And they might have a lot of them took their names, their last
took their names, yeah, and they would pronounce them slightly different. And I can't remember exactly. I'm gonna have to look it up so I can tell you which episode to listen to and what her name is, because she was really an incredible woman. But it was really interesting to hear about that relationship, that it had lasted for so long, like, and that they had such a good relationship, even though this family had owned them. Like,
Right.
and it's so I guess I could see where that would like come from. Like they're talking here about like the faithful Negro, right? And who chose like slavery over freedom, right?
Yeah.
And like that's not, and they're saying that that's what the best
Right.
of the best did, right? That's what the
and
best
when we say
blacks
there,
did.
we're looking at this article that's about the Daughters of the Confederacy. And I guess, this is a deep part of the subject. This is obviously like a very dynamic topic, but where we are right now is really, really deep. And there's more that lends itself to this conversation, but the surface for me personally, I don't know about any of us, but the surface for me is a considerable lack of education across the board.
Well, and not even a lack of education, but like an actual intentional false
Mm-hmm.
education.
Yeah.
That is like so disconcerting to think that they fought in this particular way to teach children something that was just untrue.
Yeah,
like,
just leaving it out would be one thing, because then
Right.
you learn the knowledge. And
because
you're like,
our
oh,
history
okay.
our history is revisionist. Like all of our history classes are revisionist. We only hear about certain people, and they're usually like famous white men, and that's just the way, and that's like not what our history actually looks like, which is now a great time to make a shameless plug for my new podcast that'll be coming out soon, called Femme History. And it's all about highlighting women throughout our history who have not been given their fair due of credit for what they've done. And so we're going to talk about really incredible female figures.
And it's going to be under Purple Mountain Pods, which is
Yes.
our production company.
Yes, it'll be
Exactly.
the second official podcast. to come
Yes,
out.
and so that'll be coming out in the next couple months, so look out for it, and I'll let you guys know as we get closer to when that will be released, and we're going to release it as a limited series and then decide if we want to continue, and I think we probably will, because I really love the idea.
But there are a lot of awesome women that we're going to talk about.
So many incredible women, and I actually crowdsourced a lot of the names, so it was a
Okay.
lot of people who I didn't know, and I looked into them, and people, I mean, women from all walks of life, all shapes and sizes and colors, and it's really really interesting, and the whole idea is that we're going to highlight all kinds of women. So that includes trans women, that includes black women, white women, women of other nationalities, like all kinds of things. We're not just highlighting, like white American women. Like that's not what I'm doing here. In fact, our first episode will be for Audre Lorde, who is a famous warrior poet, who was a black woman and a lesbian and a womanist. Really amazing woman. So check it out. Yeah, she was a womanist. That was a term she used.
Really?
Yeah. She
See,
liked
learning
that more than
already.
feminist, because she thought at that time the feminist was very white.
Oh, wow.
Feminism in itself was a very white culture,
Wow.
and she didn't feel like they made room for
oh, wow.
others, and so
Y'all.
she actually came up with the term womanist to include that, and that
yeah.
brings us back to this is like with the modern day comes modern solutions, right? So like it's not as easy for the Daughters of the Confederacy to go into a school and help indoctrinate children as it might have been in the 1950s, right?
Right.
Where that would have been easier.
Right.
But what they do now is they mostly file suits. So they file lawsuits against so mostly what we're seeing is like in a lot of ways they've kind of they're not in their heyday at all. Like they've kind of
You mean
become
now?
quiet right now
Yeah.
in the modern day. The UDC is not nearly as powerful as they used to be, and
But they still exist.
but they still exist,
Right.
and they still get funding, and they still are a nonprofit who gets funding from people, which is that means they don't pay taxes.
That's mind-blowing.
Which blows my mind. But
So
I guess
they're
that's
federally-
part of America.
That's
They're
why
protected.
Then, I mean, if you think about it, that's why it's taken so long for the government to like name the Ku Klux Klan as a terrorist organization.
Well,
'Cause
no,
that
they
means they're
actually
funding
named
it.
them. They named them a terrorist like group in like the 1800s, and then it was
What?
just ignored.
Yeah.
And then they came out with it again. The FBI put them on our domestic terrorism list a couple of years ago or something like that.
What we have I mean, if it's safe to say, can we say that our states are funding terrorism?
In some ways.
State-sanctioned terrorism?
I mean, in some ways, if you look at the UDC is not a terrorist group. They're just really misinformed, and they do things like fight against monuments being taken down. So that's a big part of what they do now, is that they fight with lawsuits, a lot of them. And in fact, like, they actually had a case against Vanderbilt, which is in our town or in our area. And because the school wanted to take Confederate out of the name of one of their dorms. And so the dorm had Confederate in the name, and the UDC had given them money in like the 30s or something like that for that. And they wanted them to give them the money back with inflation for 2016 prices. So they actually settled and gave them like $1 million.
Wow.
Instead of keeping Confederate in the name. So good for you, Vanderbilt. That's awesome. But they also talk about, like, there's a mural that was in Crossville that got a bunch of attention because it was literally like there was a big rebel flag, a big Confederate flag on the wall, and a picture of one kid in a red suit and a blue kid hanging from a tree, like, or a white kid in a blue suit hanging from a tree, lynched. And it was supposed to be like a sports thing, like rivalry or whatever. But it was like a freaking lynching painted on the wall of an elementary school.
Wow.
In Crossville.
Wow.
Yeah. So crazy. South Cumberland, I think. South Cumberland Elementary School.
That there shows us that we are not educating ourselves. We're not speaking to true history.
People were walking past that every day, and more than likely the UDC had put that statue up or put up that mural. That was a big way that they helped influence children to believe this idea. Is that they would go into schools and they would put up monuments and murals of generals, or they would get they would pay money to have the school named after like Confederate generals and stuff like that. So that's why we still have like Robert E. Lee School and stuff like that, which is crazy. Like we should not be glorifying these people, you know? And in fact, this reminds me of our special guest, Sherman Neal, that you're going to interview. And he actually has been fighting for a while in Murray, Kentucky, to have a statue of Robert E. Lee taken down that's on the Callaway County courthouse grounds.
Yeah. And he's a retired Marine, and now he's a football coach down there in Murray. And he moved there specifically to coach football, but it kind of sparked this movement in him when his 3-year-old asked him about a statue of Robert E. Lee, and he had no idea what to tell him. He didn't know how to explain it. And so, his focus was, I cannot be a preacher to my kids about justice and about, equality and all these things if I'm not doing something directly to influence that in their life.
Right.
And so he has been, fighting this fight to get this statue taken down. There's an article on Resource about it, OhioValleyResource.org. It's a really, really good article. It kind of details everything that's going on. It has direct quotes from him, direct quotes from county officials. And, it's going to be interesting to hear how he has been navigating this. In the article itself, it talks about how when he started this battle, he was getting direct threats.
Oh, wow.
And the issue with that is his first letter that he wrote out did not speak to him being a Marine. It didn't speak to him being a coach where he was coaching at the school. He just was a concerned citizen. And then all of a sudden he started getting all these threats.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you that it's just like intertwined.
Oh, yeah.
It was,
and it runs so deep.
Yeah.
Like, people believe this so wholeheartedly, and they believe that this is our heritage, but like, that is not something we should be glorifying, in my opinion. And I guess, tell us if you disagree. Absolutely tell us if you and tell us why. Don't just say that that you think the Confederate statue should stay up. Tell us why you think they should stay up.
Right.
Why are they important to you? And why, if they are hurting other people in our country, is it worth it to keep them up?
Yeah.
Are they that important?
Yeah.
Is it that important to glorify the losers, right? Or somebody who stood for something so egregious, right? It's like the there's so many laws about this in Germany. Like, you can't have a Nazi flag, you can't have a swastika anywhere. Like, it is illegal because it is such a dark part of their history. And why don't we see the Confederacy as the same way? Why have we instead allowed it to be glorified for all these years?
That's exactly right.
You know, and I don't know. It's one of those things. What do you guys think? Do you think that the statues should stay up or should they come down?
Why should they stay up?
Exactly.
That's the argument I want to hear. Why?
Right.
Because almost every time that they give you an answer, it's false information.
I would like to say that the article states that Sherman he's not directly advocating for the destruction of the statues.
Most people are not. Most
people
are just talking about removal and putting them into a museum.
Putting them somewhere else.
Yes, because like we have a Confederate museum in New Orleans, like that holds that kind of stuff, that has that dark history, and like I think we should look at that and we should analyze that and we should look at what that insight that comes from that. Like, we should see something from that, but it shouldn't be glorified in our public spaces. That should be something you choose to go see.
It's like it's a statue of someone that fought against America.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
They conceded from the United States of America and became their own country and fought against us. Why would we have statues of someone like that? And if that's your history, then
You're on the wrong side of history.
yeah.
What do you think, JP?
What I want to do, I would like to erect a statue in the middle of New York City
Oh
Lord. Where's this going?
of Osama bin Laden.
Oh,
And see what these people have to say about that.
wow.
Because it's by and large the same thing at that point.
There's definitely I could definitely see a correlation, like, to
Let's just call a spade. I mean, we said it last week. I mean, I said it last week, and I understand we've got
The difference is that their ancestors were not
right.
Like,
But
that's
let's
the
remove
difference.
their personal feeling out of the equation. At the end of the day, it's a statue glorifying hate against the United States of America.
yeah.
I think by removing your personal, like, your
We wouldn't have a problem if we
The-
could remove the personal side of it. I mean, that's
'cause
really
that's
Exactly.
that's
So-
everyone's argument
So
against.
I would like to know why people feel so strongly about the Confederacy.
I think they think that that's their heritage, right? Like, they
I-
think that
I
in
would like to
some
know-
way
and
that
this-
represents their ancestors
Exactly.
or
Well,
something
I
like
mean,
that.
they have a
want-
slogan: "The South will rise again."
Right.
I want anyone that feels in the particular way of holding on to these statues. And I mean, hey, it's a legitimate claim. If you want to hold the statues, I mean that's your personal belief. But I want to actually know why, because basically what Cody was saying just a second ago. I want to know why. Why is the Confederacy so close to you? What happened in the Confederacy in that small blip of history? I mean, the Confederacy lasted less time than lost. Okay,
Right.
like
Wow.
I mean, like
But you're not gonna like the honest, true answers, or is gonna be...
no. I don't want to like the honest, true answers. I want to know the honest, true answers because I want to be able to call their. I want to be able to call their.
You know the answer.
Exactly. Like I just want to. I want them to be able to say why.
And articulate it.
And
Yeah.
you need to be able to articulate it and not just say, "Oh, because of this." It's just like the claim of, the South seceded because of states' rights. States' rights to what? And I want to see that argument devolve into just a whole bunch of
Right, because they don't actually
You're just trying
know.
to get away from saying, "Oh, states' rights to have slaves."
Right,
I mean,
which
like,
is
if you
there.
read-
It's in the document.
If you read the Constitution of the Constitution of the Confederacy, if you read the preamble, if you read the speech that Jefferson Davis gave when he was talking about the Constitution of the Confederacy, I mean, it's obvious that that's what it was. It was about slavery, and just for them to be able to say, "Oh, it was states' rights," and then just end the sentence there, without giving a further explanation and having the actual like guts to stand for what they believe in. And if what they believe in is something racist and hateful, then believe in that, but at least have the balls to say that that's what you believe, instead of hiding behind something that is just an ideology. Like, oh,
Yeah.
states' rights. Okay, cool, let's talk about that. States' rights to what? And then I want to hear that argument. That's what I want to hear. And I want to know that whenever people are talking about these statues. I want to know why people feel so strongly about it, to where, okay, let's compare. Again, it's not the same thing, but let's compare like the Confederacy to Nazi Germany. Why do we feel so strongly about, quote, Nazi Germany, comparing it to the Confederacy, and Germans don't feel the same way? Now, there is a certain subsect of people in Germany that are still Nazis. I mean, obviously.
There's a subsect in America that are Nazis.
And
They exist.
It's just
They do.
that isn't glorified in the streets.
Well, love this conversation. I'm not gonna lie. So, I'm gonna try to make sure I get my thoughts together here. There's a lot going on in this brain. Let's get to this subject of the comparison between Nazi Germany and Confederacy. I have an observation in my mind that I've noticed for a while. You brought up museums.
Mhm.
And drive down, I think it's 85, I don't know, 65 or 85, in Alabama, going through, you go Birmingham all the way down to Montgomery. There's a few things you'll see. One of the main things that you'll see, I don't know what mile marker it is, and I'm fairly certain it's still there because I'm sure it'd be a big deal if it ever came down, is a gigantic Confederate flag
Oh, Lord.
dedicated to the Daughters of the Confederacy and the men that died in the Confederate battle.
Right, which was a big reason that these statues were supposedly put up, was to honor the Confederate soldiers who had died.
Right.
Right, and it's like, yeah, but they died fighting for something
Right.
horrible.
Yeah,
you know?
very horrible.
And also, I just want to point out the UDC, the Daughters of the Confederacy, funded the Robert E. Lee statue that Sherman is trying to have taken down.
Wow. It all
Circles back around.
But so anyway, what I'm trying to get at is we see regular examples of the Confederacy in terms of remembering its history, in terms of the men on the side that was against the United States, the men that wanted slavery. And we parallel that to the relationship that we have with Europe and Germany and the Holocaust. There are Holocaust museums that exist in America.
Oh, yeah.
You can go to many, many different Holocaust museums.
Yeah, there's actually what it used to be the D-Day Museum. It's now the National World War II Museum is in New Orleans. I've been to it so many times I could not even tell you, because my
Wow.
dad's like a huge war buff.
Okay.
And I've seen the whole. I mean, there's a Holocaust exhibit that's been there for my whole life, essentially.
I've been to the one to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It was very interesting. I loved it. But there's something that you have to say to yourself that we're not saying is, where are the slavery museums? Where are the
Oh,
museums
damn.
about Jim Crow?
Yeah, because there's a civil rights museum in
There's a
Atlanta, but
Holocaust
it's one of the
museum.
only ones in the country, I think.
Exactly. Wait. So what you just said is very important. Montgomery just opened up the Legacy Museum. It's directly related to all of the lynchings that took place in the Southeast.
Oh, wow.
And it's powerful. I've never been, but I've researched it. Their pictures are amazing. There's these huge columns that are hanging from the ceiling that
I've
represent the
seen
many,
this.
the many people that
Yes.
were lynched. He went to each county and grabbed the soil from the locations where people were lynched, and they're on this huge display in these masonry
I have
jars.
goosebumps.
I know. I
Oh,
want to go.
man.
We should totally go.
We should go. That's not that far.
It's not that far at all. But what I'm trying to get at is the education level behind the atrocity of slavery, moving into Jim Crow, moving into the Great Migration, moving into Reconstruction. It's not there.
It's not there. It's missing.
It's just not there.
Yeah.
And there's
it's being erased.
Absolutely, Alex. And there's an article that CBS wrote that is talking about. The article is called 50 States, 50 Different Ways of Teaching America's Past. And it is talking about a 2-month-long investigation into how Black history is taught in the U.S. And essentially, they discovered that there are no standardized social studies regiments across the board nationwide. So each state just gets to name whatever they want to
Their curriculum, yeah.
as their curriculum. And one of the things that was brought up is that let's see if I can find it here. CBS News found that 7 states do not directly mention slavery in their state standards.
Oh my God.
And 8 states do not mention the civil rights movement.
What?
Girl, only 2 states mention white supremacy. This is a
my
2-month-long
God.
investigation. They have tons of sources.
And then across the state is not necessarily
Correct.
the same either.
That's thank you
because
very,
it
very
can
much.
literally be broken down to a local level of what's being taught school by school.
Correct.
Can be different.
Correct. And then we talk about the counties or the states that are heavily influenced by the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Right? And how they
And
were
so,
in the schools
For
originally.
me, like, I have a certain amount of, like, I can see both sides of this
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of, as a teacher, as an educator, I choose the things that I get to teach, the things I think are most important, the things that I think are the most directly needed by my students,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you would think that teachers are, like, doing that, but you have to have, that's like, you hope that they have good intentions.
That's it right there.
And that they're not racist,
Right,
which
right,
we
right.
know is not true.
Well, we see
or that they
videos.
haven't been taught incorrectly.
There's tons of videos of these kids interacting with these teachers, and they're like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about," and the teacher's like, "Get out,"
Oh, yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
instead
if
of
you question them, you
if
know.
you question them. So, you know, we go back to what JP was saying. You know, where is that relationship? When you have your parents at home telling you one thing, you have a school system that's not telling you anything, and then you have all these other external influences such as the media,
Yeah.
such as music, such as, you know, all these other things that are influencing you and not teaching you the right way. Of course you're going to get, you know, the karma there, the cause and effect.
Yeah.
There is that you're going to get an organization that rises up and says, "Hey guys, Black Lives Matter."
Right.
And then when
It's
there's
not surprising that we're seeing this.
you see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
then there's going to be, because the effect of the lack of education is, hey, Black Lives Matter.
Right.
That's the effect. The cause of Black Lives Matter is we don't know this education,
Right.
so we don't know to say, hey, by the way, Black Lives Matter too.
Right.
That's all this is about.
Yeah.
Because for how many years has America said to Black lives, you don't matter. I mean,
Right.
the LA riots, you know, all these different things.
You're 3/5 of a person.
Bro,
Yeah.
when they wrote the daggone Constitution, every man, or is it Constitution? Every man was created equal. All men are created equal.
But it's like, you know that they
Declaration
looked
of
at each
What
Declaration
other.
about
of
those
Independence.
women, though?
They
Right.
looked,
Not the women.
yeah, they looked at each other and they were like, you know what I
You
mean.
know what I mean.
You know, there's no National Women's History Museum.
You see what I'm saying?
There's not one.
They don't
Like,
want you to know how great y'all are.
That's
you know
right.
what I'm saying?
I mean, come on, man.
Slay.
Come on.
Just slay one
See,
time.
We just
Also-
want somebody to say that we've done something worth something. You know how many incredible women have been in this country and how many
Yes.
amazing things they've done?
Yes.
And the same with I went to the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta, which is a really new museum. That's it's only been erected in the last couple of years. And it was so powerful. And, you know, I have to I had to really step back and think, like, I'm a person who goes out of my way to educate myself.
Yeah.
I am a person who does research and who is more liberal, so I tend to be more interested in things like Black history and all that. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's true.
True.
And so I've gone out of my way to look up these people, you know, that I've read about or whatever, and listen to podcasts and
Right.
things like that. And I still don't know anything. Like, I learned so much at that museum that I had no idea about. And it's like, it just shows you the importance of that education. Like, it
Man.
needs to be there. It's heartbreaking that it's not there. It's heartbreaking that our children are not being taught, that our Black children aren't seeing themselves represented. It's the same thing with women. Like, when you are in history class, all those years of being in class, and occasionally they throw out a woman's name, and you're like, oh, that's amazing. Somebody who looks like me, who did something great. And, you know, it's like, it's never represented. And that
She sewed our
representation is
flag.
important. Betsy Ross, yeah.
That's right.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, so.
I'm going to say this, and I would love to hear from the rest of the crowd. But just bear with me, okay? middle school, we sat in class and we had to be quiet, and we all had to read the Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh yeah.
And you was a test, and you had to pass it. You had to know what she was talking about. You had to know when she said it, what date, all these different things. I did not do well on that test. But my point is,
But why aren't we learning the bondwoman's narrative by Henry Louis Gates Jr.?
you see what I'm saying?
See,
Like,
ours-
why aren't we hearing those stories? Which is the first story. Like, it was one of the first actual documents that was found that a slave woman wrote because she learned how to read and write.
I can
and
say I've never
secretly-
read that.
Oh, it's amazing. You should really read it. I mean, it's horrifying, but it's really an incredible
Yeah.
book. And
It should be something we read at ninth grade.
but that's the thing. That's it. It should have been there with the Diary of Anne Frank. Why weren't we reading that?
Yeah.
You know, why
So,
wasn't that important?
I'm just leaving that there.
It was our
please.
history.
We didn't read it silently. Ours was a play that we acted
Really?
out.
Wow. How did you
So-
do that?
We all we took turns being different characters in the book. Wow. And we acted out.
They wanted you to know how
Yeah.
it was to be a Jew in the Holocaust.
That's
Same
exactly
with Night. Same
that's
with Elie
exactly how we
Wiesel's
did Tom
Night.
Sawyer. And
Really?
I never
do you
read
have-
Tom Sawyer.
Do you have any idea how weird
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was for
Oh, I
kids?
bet.
I
bet
saw
that was so
Oklahoma and I
weird.
was just like, okay.
I've never seen Oklahoma either.
Yeah, I don't think
No,
I've
no.
ever seen
I was like,
Oklahoma.
okay. All right. Yeah. It's.
Yeah, there's like some serious
yeah.
undertones there. Yeah.
Serial undertones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine. Some of that is rather problematic.
So anyway, I guess it's a good time to take a break and
Let's
go
take a break.
interview Mr. Sherman Neal.
Yes, absolutely. So stick around and listen for our interview with Sherman Neal and hear all about his efforts to have this statue of Robert E. Lee taken down.
Epic.
Yeah, absolutely.
In 1917, the United Daughters of the Confederacy erected a statue in the middle of downtown Murray, Kentucky, commemorating a Confederate soldier. The statue has been facing the South for generations. Today, in 2020, nearly almost 103 years after its placement, Sherman Neal and many who support him say it's time to come down.
Murray was constructed with, the courthouse in the middle of, the town, the small town area, the courthouse square. And on that courthouse square, there's a statue of Robert E. Lee. So with our specific statue, to kind of describe it, it's like a three-pronged issue. So once the statue itself is put up by the United Daughters of the Confederacy, who's done hundreds of these throughout, the Southeast and some other places. So you have the statue of Robert E. Lee itself that sits on top of a pedestal and really a structure that's, in remembrance of the Confederate soldiers, and it has a, CSA marker on it.
So what's the big deal?
Underneath that statue, there's actually a water fountain there. The significance of that water fountain is it was a whites-only water fountain until desegregation, and then the city or the county, it just magically got turned off right when desegregation happened for certain people not to be able to use it together with other people. And so that's there as well.
The timing of when the statue was placed and the cultural divide at that time still plays a faint melody of a historical measure.
The statue was put up in 1917, which is, right around the time of the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in the area. There were active Klan members. Nathan Bedford Forrest himself is probably one of the more revered Civil War people in this area. He, of course, was the man who started the Ku Klux Klan down in Pulaski, Tennessee. And all the bad things that come with statues like this and what it represents came. So if you go back through old newspapers, statue goes up, there's a black family in town, black family's house gets burnt down. If you go to the 1950s, and there are discussions about the statue and using it as a talking point, what are they talking about is keeping schools segregated. So even though Brown versus Board came out in like 1954, you didn't see real desegregation in this area until after. So a common theme that you'll find is, we'll take all routes. I think it's like Winston Churchill is a quote it gets attributed to. Is like Americans will, do everything wrong until, absolutely faced with the decision where they have to do something right, something like that. That's basically what's going on here.
During the course of the experience, not all of the community was excited about the removal. The city government is willing to listen to Sherman's argument. The county, however, has no desire.
Murray being the city, it's right in the middle of the city. So the court, so legally, this is where we get into hurdle number one, and we'll probably talk about a little bit of what does it take to move it and why can't you. And, so the city, owns the city, obviously, except for a very small, probably half-acre plot of land where the courthouse is on.
Oh, okay.
So which means that even though the city wants to do something to that, something that's surrounded by the city, they can't because the county owns it. Now, if you look at demographics, the city is, the more typically progressive, business-oriented agent, whereas the county, they don't care. And in fact, there's a lot of animosity between cities and counties, and so, you see that here with the city, county, and the city government and the county government.
The response to a leaked letter to the mayor prompted the community to react immediately.
I was driving to CVS to get some dry erase markers because I was like, all right, I need to get a whiteboard and have a plan, a timeline, etc. I was basing off what the University of Texas had done, knowing I needed a template beforehand. And then I saw the Instagram live video, which was there's a guy who had driven through the crowd of protesters in the street. He had pulled out what looked to be bear spray and maced several people. At the same time, or around that same time, another man had pulled out a pistol and aimed it at several people. Some of those people included football players here. This is why I saw that, and I was like, hold on real quick. There's people out here, being assaulted in the street because of something that you did. You have to at least physically go down there and see what's going on. So I stopped. I went to the square, which is about a mile from my house, and that's really what first opened my eyes to reaction. I mean, there was time probably about approximately 50 to 100 people per reporting at the square. There was school had just gotten out, so it was largely at this point in time high schoolers, I want to say, and younger adults that stayed. But the surrounding them in the square. So if you imagine the courthouse, is in the middle, then surrounding in the square is just stereotypical trucks, Confederate flags, guys perched like this, open carry, mean mugging people. I ended up having discussions with, quite a few of them who had already known who I was at that point.
And if you haven't already guessed by now, it was Sherman's letter. It turns out there are a few cities that have successfully removed their Confederate statues. These statues were in public and private spaces alike. So what's so different about Murray, Kentucky?
One of the interesting things I've been trying to find, why haven't we been able to get this done for 8 months at this point in time with other cities the same size have? And it's the fact that, those other cities like Tuskegee or Pensacola, Florida is another one. They have a Black or minority population that's aware of we've been through this. We know that small things that we leave right here, y'all gonna take them out. And so we have to eliminate it everywhere. Whereas here, it's it's all good. Everything's fine. You're just stirring up trouble. We can leave these small things. It won't lead to anything else bad. And this is not the case, as y'all probably know. So.
Sherman has been met with a lot of criticism during this 8-month-long process, and it's unsure whether or not his self-proclaimed enemies truly understand his position.
People, the first criticism I get is, it's just a statue, quit being a snowflake, it's just granite, figure out how to fix something else. I'm like, I got it. But I know in my mind that, that plant, when you pull it up, has roots. And the roots of that poisonous tree are everything else that we have to fight, which is what's come out of that. Small government, large government, policing, assault, white supremacy, all of it immediately revealed itself once you start pulling on that tree.
Wow.
And so where is that plant planted at? Where are those roots? all these statues, per UDC instruction, are at courthouses, the seats of where you're supposed to go fix these things. So it's one thing to have it on public property that we're kind of paying for off a highway. It's another thing to have it on private property, where if you want to just poison yourself and wake up with hate every day, that's something that you can do. But it's another thing that we can't accept if you're poisoning, the very well where we're supposed to go to get justice from.
There is a clear-cut cause and effect to this issue. The information of the atrocities of the past is hard to understand and further, not so standard knowledge. The county says it's just a statue. The people say it's a symbol of hate.
But with these ones in particular, since they're built on a myth that's a myth that's propagated by white supremacist groups, you will have white supremacy and what the Confederacy stood for bleed through everything that you do. And that blood is in real paperwork. That's when I have to type a paper on, educating myself, I have to cite a myth from the National Park Service. These source documents that the National Park Service is using, or the Kentucky Military Heritage Commission, come from authors that were ex-Confederate soldiers who told people that they're propagating this myth, back when this happened in the 1900s and late 1880s. So
Sherman and his team have already made multiple court appearances and appeals submitted to his state government with positive response. For the county, however, that is a different story.
The city government voted unanimously to remove the monument within, I want to say, 2 weeks.
Okay.
The county government voted unanimously to keep the monument after about 3 months. So right now, we can't do anything until the county makes a decision. So the governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, has said monuments in front of courthouses should be removed.
Okay.
John Morant, if y'all watch basketball, he has said it should be removed.
Wow.
The national organization, the NAACP, a litany of Amnesty International, especially when we talk about those roots. Amnesty International helps refugees and human rights crises in Syria, yet they're thinking about this.
Wow.
National Organization of Women is worried about equal pay, but they know they can't get equality while we have these things. NAACP in Kentucky is worried about Breonna Taylor, but they know that the same incidents that are resulting there and the same lack of accountability, you can see that with the way that people are acting and not being held accountable in places here in the middle of the day in broad daylight on film. So there's everybody that I can think of, with the exception of the county government right now. The county's position is that the will of the people indicates that it should stay, meaning the majority. My position on that is that as elected officials, you're not elected to just reciprocate what any man said.
Right.
Being trusted because you have more information, you have more education, you have more access to other groups. And right now, I mean, we'd still be segregated if it was up to the will of the people to desegregate or segregate.
Right.
So at some point in time, somebody has to make a decision based on what's right.
For Sherman and the entire city of Murray, Kentucky, the fight for equality will continue well after the statue comes down. But in the meantime, we must do our part to be the spark for the hope in our communities. You can find Sherman's full story on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Spark in the Valley. For Spark in the Valley, this is Julius Johnson.
All right. That was a very interesting interview. Needless to say.
Did you learn a lot?
I learned more than I thought I would.
I really like that one part where he was talking about the statues.
We talked about some very interesting topics.
All right, guys, we haven't had that conversation yet, so that's why it's funny.
You're ruining our illusion, babe.
He just ruined it for us.
No,
it's
but
hilarious. But
But JP saying like, "Oh, that part about the statues
Yeah.
would just sound dumb if you don't know."
But yes, we are back. We just interviewed Mr. Sherman Neal from Murray, Kentucky, about his experience with removing or attempting to have the conversation around the removal of a statue.
Of Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee. It's in a very prominent location.
Yeah.
And yeah. Education. Listen, let's just wrap this up by saying, or wrap back into it by saying, education is so important.
So important.
The thing that I think that we need to move forward with as a country is standardizing our education across the board.
Absolutely.
The thing that
And they're trying, but it's not working.
Yeah,
I don't
problem,
know.
I mean, they're still trying to get evolution.
Though. There's issues
standardized
with
everywhere.
standardization.
the problem is funding for like the different programs that we have in like our different school systems. The way that our education system is set up is that the funding for the school, like, okay, so we have national directives as to what we're supposed to have a baseline of learning.
Right.
The problem
Right.
is that the funding for those programs is left to the local municipalities. So you've got rich areas of this country,
Yeah.
you've got poor areas of this country.
Yeah.
Let's take Athens for an example, okay, here in McMinn County. So Athens has to tax their citizens, takes that money, portion of it, and then funds the schools. The median income in Athens, I think, is like 40. It's like 35,
It's less
40.
than 40.
Yeah,
It's in
And
the 30s.
So
38 or 9.
it's you take that percentage of taxes that gets paid, and compare it to a city like Knoxville. Compare it to a city, I mean, like even go farther, like San Francisco,
Nashville.
Okay? Nashville. Okay. Those counties, like Davidson County, is going to have a lot more money to pay for its school system, so they're going to have a better education system there.
Right.
And even closer, like the districts inside the different cities. So like, if you live closer to a school and you get districted for that school, the money that you are being taxed is going to pay for the school in that district. Okay, so different people that live in different parts of town are going to make different types of money because, I mean, the richer people live closer to richer people, poor people live closer to the poor people. So the schools in the poor areas aren't going to have the same amount of funding, so they can't do these programs as well as a school that has like all this money. Take like have you guys ever been to I think it's Cleveland High School? This school is it's almost laughable how much better Cleveland High School is.
Cleveland High School and Walker Valley, and like comparatively to
No, like I know people that live here in Athens whose parents will pay like the school system for them to go to Cleveland High School, Walker Valley.
Is that legal though?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All that is money.
I know. Well, I know a lot of people that literally that moved so their children could go to those schools.
Yeah, and so the thing is, it's like the places that have more money can fund these schools a little bit better. Like Cleveland High School, what I was saying, they've got a football stadium.
Wow.
Okay, they've got like these training facilities for their students and stuff. They had like when I was in school, in high school, we fought tooth and nail, myself and my professor, our teacher, I guess. We fought tooth and nail to get funding for this media program that they did here in Athens, which was great. They got a ton of money, like a couple $100,000 to like buy cameras, lighting rigs, and all this stuff. And it was a good program. I mean, it went to hell after that teacher and our class was gone because the person that they put in charge didn't know what they were doing, you know. But you take a school like in Cleveland, that same type of program is like recognized as one of the best programs in a high school for like video production. They have a lot of people that get into that because they have the amount of money and the resources to be able to do that. So not only is the funding skewed, then we've got the education's being skewed as well because these schools have more money to put into better education for their students. And more opportunities. So it's not just one problem. It just goes back to, it's the whole system.
It's a huge fundamental problem.
It is a fundamental error in the system that needs to get fixed from the top down, but nobody wants to talk about that.
I went to
Nobody wants
Central. I don't know if you guys know how poor Central, like
Compared to McMinn.
Central. Like we had one Spanish teacher, and that was the only foreign language we were allowed to take. And like, I wasn't allowed to do more than one fine arts either.
Wow.
So like I was in band, so I couldn't. They wanted me to play piano for the choir, but I couldn't because I was already in band. And it was just like, and I couldn't do drama. I couldn't do anything because I was in band, and they didn't see. There's like you get one fine arts and you don't get to do anything else, regardless of your path.
Yeah, like I know McMinn had,
weird.
as far as foreign language, they had Spanish was like obviously the main one that everyone would take, but then they also had French. I don't know exactly how long they had it. I don't know if they still have it. I know that they had one French teacher and they only had like one French class, and I was in it. And I mean, it was great. Like I loved the teacher. It was really cool. Like we even did like a culinary study where we would go and we tried we cooked or someone cooked escargot for us and we ate snails. I think it's on video from like when I was in high school and stuff. I'd have to find it on one of those ancient CDs.
A DVD.
DVDs, a DVD. But like it's just there's just a fundamental problem. It needs to get solved.
Absolutely there is. It
And
definitely needs to be solved. I'm not sure that standardization is the way to go, but I think more federal funding for coming down to even a county level or whatever for schooling is definitely something that should be considered, or a different way of funding schools so that it's more equitable.
So okay, so my question then with what you're saying is when I'm talking about standardization.
You're talking about curriculum, right?
Yes, standardizing a curriculum, not
Right.
exams.
Well, there's problems with
Yeah.
that. I mean, there's and one of the biggest issues, of course, is standardized testing. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of teachers will, I think, agree that standardized testing is not the way to go about making sure that students learn.
Yeah, because
what they're
students
supposed
all
to
learn differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Students learn differently. And so I think that there has to be some leeway for teachers to be able to expound on certain things and because it depends on where you are regionally, things are more important than other things. But I think that you're right that there has to be some standard, because otherwise we see these really inequitable situations like where there's only two schools that talk about, or two states that
Right.
talk about white supremacy. Like, I think you're absolutely right in
Yeah,
that
because I
sense.
mean, it's like there can't be this disconnect between what was and what you want it to be.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to talk about the Confederacy as a secession movement that started a new country. Like that's just the fact of the matter. Okay, you can't turn around and be like, oh, it was because of states' rights. No, it was because of states' rights to slavery.
Yeah.
If you wanna finish your sentence there, buddy. You know, and it's like you have to have like a baseline of like we have to just go back as a country to having a general understanding of what the truth is.
Yeah,
Because if
we've
not,
lost that.
then we are where we are now, where everything is fake news, everything is made up, everything is lies if it hurts your feelings or whatever. And it's like, no, you have to have like that at least core understanding of what is real, what actually happened, and what didn't happen. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that that any state is teaching that the Holocaust didn't happen or anything like that,
But a
using,
large proportion
but
of
a-
Americans believe it didn't
that
happen.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like we have to have this understanding of this is the truth of our world. This is the truth of our history. And if we don't have that, then what type of people are we raising in this country, you know? Like my daughter, I want her to know the truth about everything, you know? As egregious as terrible as the truth may have been, as hurtful as it may have been, that's still the truth, because we need to know our past to be able to build it to a better future.
Agreed.
That's right. That's right.
And that's actually really when we were talking about like with the statues and with these different initiatives that the Daughters of the Confederacy would take in order to keep white supremacy alive. One of the biggest things is that every time we would make some grand gesture of progress, something like the Civil Rights era or during Jim Crow era when black people were starting to get some power and things like that, political power, we would see this resurgence and this like surge of them putting up more statues, naming more things after Confederate generals, putting up more murals, having more ceremonies, doing more fake funerals for soldiers that had died, 50 years ago
It's
or
almost
whatever.
like they were trying to conserve the way that things used to be.
Absolutely.
instead of
That's exactly what they were
progressing
trying to
forward.
do. That's exactly what they were trying to do. They don't want to see progress,
Nice.
So
Nice.
anyway, it's problematic, and we definitely, I think it needs to be. It's one of those big national conversations that needs to happen, and I don't know. I mean, it's a big thing to take on. That's for sure.
JP said, what kind of people are we raising in America? And if we wrap up everything that we've been talking about thus far to a pretty little box and put a bow on it, and divide that between two presidents, you have 70,000 people that voted for
70 million.
70 million. 70 million.
That's fake news,
It's
Julius.
fake news. It's not 70,000. 70 million, which is a lot worse. That voted for an administration that represents all of the negative aspects of the conversation that we've been having right now.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, we
And-
had
and I
80,
still-
80 million?
Yeah, and I still think it's
On the other
crazy
side?
that like
75.
yeah, so you've got 75 and 70, right? So that's what 145. There are over 300 million people in this country.
Yeah, there's
That
a
means
lot
it's
of
Over
people
still-
that vote.
350, I think.
Yeah.
It's still less than half the people actually cared enough about what
There you
was
go.
going on.
I think
to
it
be able
was,
to-
I
but
thought
that
it was
works.
something like 65%.
I guess that
now.
300 million is also including like people that are underage, but still,
Right.
I mean,
because
like
it was like
yeah.
65% of
Eligible
voters
voting.
actually,
Eligible voters.
eligible
And so
voters
it's like,
actually.
well, yeah, it was a
or maybe
the
more
highest,
than that. I think it was 60, almost 68.
While it was still like the highest turnout that we've ever had, or whatever. I still don't understand how it's not higher.
I agree.
You know,
I
it's
agree.
like how do people just go about their lives not giving a damn about what goes on?
What
You
is
know?
the highest rate that America has seen somebody vote or seen us vote or seen this?
This is one of the highest. It wasn't. It wasn't. There's others that were. There
But
was
the-
one
the-
time in
the
like the
ama-
1800s that had percentage-wise, I think. A
But then you had
similar
less.
turnout.
You had less people.
that were allowed to vote. Too.
Right, exactly. But that that turnout still for eligible voters
You
is
didn't
what
have
they're
these
comparing.
disinformation campaigns going around and the propensity that they are now, where it's like you don't know that you're being lied to just when you open up your phone. You know, like you don't know that you're being lied to or misinformed when you're being lied to or misinformed anymore. Because before it was like, hey, I'm gonna lie to you, and now it's like, oh, open up your phone and like scroll a little bit and like see
And
what
you'll see like 5 fake things.
Yeah, you'll see a whole
and
bunch
then
of
15
real
minutes you
thing,
spend on your phone.
Yeah.
And that kind of gets into our kind of final topic for this evening, which is misinformation has truly guided a lot of people to contract COVID.
Oh yeah, Tennessee is
Man.
struggling. We made national headlines.
No.
Yes, we did.
We
We
did?
made the New York Times today, guys.
No.
I know.
Wait, something good, right?
Nope.
No.
Turns out Athens, Tennessee, as a micro metro area, so really it's the county, it's the McMinn County, we were number 1 on the list for highest rate of increased cases
What?
in the country. And so some people are saying that is skewed information because they claimed it was Athens, Tennessee, but really they're claiming it's the county's numbers. That's fair, but they actually make they apparently made a clause about that at the bottom saying it was micro metro areas. So you have to understand that the comparison to all the other cities is the same. They're micro metro areas. So even though I think it was Tullahoma, Tennessee, it's probably not just the town of Tullahoma. It's probably whatever that micro metro area is around it. The fact of the matter is that those numbers are still rising at such a rate
Yeah,
that
and-
we're literally at the top of the list. And 8 of the cities on the top 20 were in Tennessee.
Oh,
like,
God.
Number 1 was the Athens area. Number 2 is the Cleveland area. So if you want to expand what Alex was saying, let's just say McMinn County and Bradley County.
Yeah.
But I mean, Bradley County has so many more people than McMinn County does. You know, McMinn County is a fairly small county.
Right, and this is
All
by
things
population.
Yeah,
This is
by population
cases per
percentage.
population percentage.
Yeah,
and
it's
so that's
cases
why
per
it's-
100,000 is
Yeah,
what it was.
cases per 100,000.
And I mean,
But we
obviously-
only have 30,000 people in our county. I
Yeah,
mean, it's not that many. It's the rate of
the
increase.
statistics was places with 50,000 plus only.
Oh, so we must have 50,000 more. We must have about. Oh no, actually, I just looked at it for the census for 2010. We had 52,000 in our county.
So, but I mean, still, Athens, the Athens area, McMinn County, however you want to talk about it, because I mean, Athens is basically McMinn County. Everything else is really small. But Athens is McMinn County is growing in cases so rapidly. We are, and at the same time, we have not been taking care of our hospitals. I mean, we just had that one hospital in Dayton, was it, that shut down
I
last
think
year?
so. I think so.
And it's like these
Oh,
hospitals
that-
are losing funding. Like they don't have the staff to be able to perform that. And I mean, I'm sorry, I applaud nurses and doctors and everything, but the hospital in Athens is not prepared to handle
it's
this.
terrible.
The hospital in Athens is not a great
Did
hospital.
you see that in East Tennessee, there's apparently like 200, somewhere around 285 ICU beds, and there's only 8 left in all of East Tennessee, and that was as of yesterday. So there's no telling what it looks like
That's 'cause
today.
They're closing hospitals.
It's
in these
exactly
rural
right.
areas.
They're closing hospitals, and the hospitals that are still alive can't keep up with the COVID rates. It's so high and it's so bad that they can't keep up. They don't have enough beds for everybody.
I mean, even in Knox County, which, I mean, Knox County is a pretty large county, and they have multiple
And they have
hospitals.
UT
they
and
have
all of
UT. They
that,
have Fort
yeah.
Loudon or Fort Sanders Medical Center and everything. They're already. I mean, this was from data from a week or so ago, where their ICUs were at about 80% capacity again. And that's why they started shutting everything down at 10 p.m.
It's at 97% capacity
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
The hospitals.
They're talking about building outside wards to house the new COVID cases. I mean, like, they're not
a
going to
crazy,
be they're
like,
not gonna be-
apocalyptic movie.
Yeah, they're not going to be like in the open air, but it's still going to be outside of the actual hospital. So they're going to have subpar treatment at best at that point.
Oh, sure. It's like a MASH. It's like
Exactly.
a military hospital in a freaking, like live war situation. Like, this is just, I mean,
it's
but
crazy.
part of it is that our freaking governor will not put a mask mandate out. That's why
He won't
Tennessee's
put a
on
mask
fire.
mandate on. He won't close churches where, I mean,
Yes.
it's been shown statistically that that's where people are getting this the most.
And
Churches, schools. Like, we're
Oh.
not closing these places down because it's not convenient. Well, I'm sorry, there's nothing convenient about a pandemic. That's kind of the thing. It is
Yeah.
a very
It's been
inconvenient.
extremely inconvenient.
To-
I can say personally,
to
I've had
quote-
a very inconvenient time.
To
with
quote
this.
Al Gore, it is an inconvenient truth.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Like, this pandemic is killing people in record rates.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not going to stop unless we do something about it. But we, the people, aren't going to do jack squat.
No, we're
They
waiting
have
on
to
a
mandate
vaccine.
it.
We're
We're
waiting on a
there's-
vaccine.
yeah.
And it's like, who knows? Like, that vaccine is going to come, and what's going to happen? We're going to have the anti-vaxxers that are saying that they don't want to take it because of it's whatever.
Right.
You know? And I mean, I understand there is that everyone is lying to me. The government has done this. I understand what you were saying earlier about like the Tuskegee trials and everything like that, and I get that 100%. But we're having this vaccine is about to get released in the UK. You know, it's going to go public. We can see it. We can see how it's going to affect the people there, and
It's
then
like
make that
not
decision
buying
here.
the new console as soon as it comes out. So
Exactly. It's like if
Now
the
you
console
see-
blows up
nice,
on
Cody.
people on day one, you probably don't want to buy it until
But-
maybe
we
later. You know?
Which is why
gotta
they're
get that
doing
day
so
one
many.
patch in.
I mean, that's why they're doing so many large-scale trials right now
Mm-hmm.
to test for that kind of stuff. Which is how they usually do it. They've just fast-tracked it, and they're doing the same protocols. They're just doing it a lot faster than they would have normally done it because it's so vitally important.
Yeah, it's
right
widespread.
Now. Yeah.
It's very widespread.
Can I ask a question about testing? So we in McMinn County, we can go to the health department and get a free COVID test.
I think
And-
some CVS's do it as well.
well, is that widespread in our
I don't
country?
think so. I don't think so.
You
I
mean
don't.
the free testing like that?
I don't get the impression from like friends and family who live in other places that is an opportunity that they have. I know that my family has had a really hard time getting tested.
Yeah,
in Louisiana.
because it costs money some places.
Oh, it costs
Well, see,
$100 a test.
So why?
Damn.
for a rapid test?
So that's
yeah.
probably that's one of the reasons that our numbers are so inflated on these charts is because
Because we're testing more?
We're testing more and we're getting more
So
cases
maybe-
because we
Like
have
Trump
we
said,
should
stop testing.
Yeah,
Right,
maybe we
stop
should stop
testing.
testing and the
Well,
coronavirus will
I'm
go
so-
away.
just trying to voice an opinion that
No, I
I'm
think
no,
that's a
yeah.
really good
No,
point, actually. I think that's a really good
absolutely,
point,
yeah,
is that
yeah.
we're maybe not seeing accurate numbers because testing is not necessarily
that's
No,
scary,
it's like,
ubiquitous.
I think it was a state in New England had just released some like numbers that they had forgotten about from like April.
They've forgotten about.
Yeah, from April, and it's like, how do you just what?
That's not relevant anymore, guys.
Yeah, and so like they're
We're in a
releasing these
whole
numbers
different
showing
ball
that
field now.
the rates were a lot higher than previously thought.
Wow.
Because they just hadn't
They
put out the
didn't
data.
put out the data.
Yeah.
And no one's going to go back and look at those numbers now. I mean, I did because I have nothing better to do.
Well, I will say the other thing that comes into play here is that it's not just that like testing is up, it's that more people are getting tested because there's more exposure. Because I can tell you, like I was getting tested once a week at the health department because I work at a school. So
Right,
I
so
was
you
like,
had to
well,
kinda-
I didn't have to. I
Oh,
was just
okay.
doing it for my own
Wow.
like relief of
Okay.
knowing that I didn't have it because I see you guys and I, and Cody's a diabetic, so I worry about that, about exposing him. So I was trying to keep on top of it, and I would go and try to get I would go and get tested, and it would take me like 15 minutes to get tested. Like I'd run through that line. It would be so easy. It's a drive-through, so they just test you in your car. I went a couple weeks ago to get tested because I was sick and I was afraid I had it.
All right.
And it took me 45 minutes. There was a line all the way down the road. They had it wrapped around this auction tent that's next to it. And I was like, well, this is crazy. I've never seen it this busy before. But it was still one tent with one tester. We went to get tested this week because we were exposed to somebody. And we got there and they had 2 tents set up and they had a line so far. We still waited 45 minutes.
It was a quarter mile long.
It was,
line at
yes.
least.
At least, and it was wrapped around this tent, and it took us 45 minutes with 2 testers. So it is doubling and doubling and doubling of people who are going to get tested because they're being exposed. So it's
on
really
top of that, where's the health department here in McMinn County?
between Athens and Etowah.
Okay, how far away is that from Athens? How out of the way?
It's like 10 minutes outside Athens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how many people actively
it's a county
think?
thing. And so I mean, it's
right.
a lot. If it was in Athens, just think how long it takes someone from the edge of Polk County to get there. It'd take them 30
Well, I mean,
minutes.
why don't they go to the Polk County?
Because they're not part of Polk
from,
County.
In Polk County.
You can only use the
See,
health
they're saying
department
the
if you're
edge,
from that
the
county.
edge of
Exactly.
the county. Yeah.
No, exactly. So I mean, Athens is it's the county seat.
Yeah.
You know, it's the largest city
I
in
think
the
it's
county.
pretty
Heart of the
common
valley.
though for like health departments and things to be a little bit outside of the city, but I don't actually know. That's just from my experience.
Yeah,
so I can't.
I want to give a
attest
shout out to
that.
them though, because they
Hell
were
yeah.
they were doing a great job.
They're
They're doing
killing
amazing
it.
We got our
work over
results
there.
back in less
2
than 2
days.
days.
That's
Yeah.
great.
That's amazing.
Kudos.
And we were
Kudos.
negative, guys. Obviously,
It's
Kudos
we're
great that
negative,
they're
so.
it's great that
McMahon.
they're doing it, but it's still it's not being advertised as well as I would like for it to be.
You mean free testing?
I think that
Yes,
they can't keep up with it. I think
Yeah.
that they're
They're
already
afraid.
drowning. I mean,
Yeah.
the time I got tested a couple
And-
weeks
and
ago,
that's
it
a
took
problem,
6
too.
days to get my results.
And that's a problem too. It's like
Yeah.
we need more staff, but we can't get more staff because
Well, they
people
need
are
more
getting
funding.
yeah, there's more funding. People are getting exhausted. Like
I was about to say,
I know
nurses
workers
are
in the-
tired, bro.
I know
Nurses are
workers in the medical
tired.
field that
Yeah.
have literally just walked away from the profession altogether.
Wow.
Yeah, I can understand
That's so
that.
sad.
No, I mean like you're just seeing people dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're seeing people dying every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you're walking up to them and you're like, all right, well we got to do your COVID test and all this stuff, and they're like, oh shut up, the COVID isn't real. Like
Yeah.
people like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
people are telling these nurses
That it's-
and medical providers that what they know isn't real. It's like me telling you media production isn't a real thing. It's like me telling you that a library isn't real.
Right,
You know,
right.
it's like it's
Like, I'm
it's
pretty
ridiculous.
sure it is.
There's
Yeah.
books in there.
Yeah,
There's
it's like
books
I
there.
am trained in my field. I know a little bit more
Yeah.
than you.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
So why don't you trust me? You know,
Exactly.
which just comes back to all
Because
of the,
when I was
the
in
distrust that we
school,
have.
they didn't say.
because when I was on
Because
Parlor,
masks don't work.
Right. And Parlor
And
told me.
there's lots of doctors that have said that. Which,
No, and
which is
there
even
was a
So
disgusting.
crazy
there was
to
that
me. It's disgusting.
there was
You're
that
right.
nurse that went on TikTok.
Yeah, there's a
that
few
ended
of
up,
them.
Yeah, that ended up
Oh,
getting
my best
fired.
friend's mom. My best friend's mom was a nurse or is a nurse, and she doesn't want to wear a mask outside of work. Like,
Oh.
Yeah, she
She
made a
doesn't
big
believe
post
in it.
about it, like I
Going
went
into a store and not wearing
I
a
wasn't wearing
mask.
my mask and I was just smiling and being me. And
I was just like, I'm disgusted by this. Like, this is gross.
And
you
it was
know?
like the nurse that went on TikTok was just like actively talking about how like dumb it all was and like all this stuff. She ended up getting fired. What did you
Good.
expect?
Yeah.
Like, what do you expect when you're a doctor and you're like, medicine isn't like the way, you know?
Right.
Y'all remember? Has anybody ever seen I Am Legend?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
man, talk about a good Will Smith movie.
That's
It's
a
great-
good one.
great
Yeah.
movie. We were
I
talking about this
cry
all day.
every
Time
fucking
the dog
time that I
dies.
watch that.
Oh, really?
When he has to
When
kill the dog.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
sad.
horrible.
No,
I
it's
remember
like,
being in theaters, bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
As my eyeliner's running. It's like,
Eyeliner's running because it's circa 2005
That's such a Cody
or
thing to
7.
I know it. He had his guitar in another seat.
Yeah.
yeah, I went to the movies with my key.
It was just him and the guitar on a date.
Just in the guitar.
No, like I was actually talking about this with somebody with one of my riders yesterday. It was if COVID had more adverse side effects to where people could actually see it and be afraid of it, it would be solved almost instantly. It would be taken care of.
Yeah,
People
like
would be
if
wearing
your
their
hair
mask.
fell out, everybody be
like-
wearing a
Yes,
mask.
you're
It's
right,
all the
you're right.
asymptomatic people that get it, and they're
That's-
like, "Oh, it's
yeah,
not bad at
that's
all."
exactly-
I know
because
it. I know
that's
it.
not
My-
Oh yeah, we got
Sad.
COVID. It was no big deal.
I've
I'm like,
heard that
so many
yeah,
times.
okay,
I
have
did too. When I went back to work, my this last job that I did, I heard people in the audience talking to each other when they're slowly coming in. It's like, "Oh, girl, yeah, last time we was here, I got COVID, but I'm good. It wasn't that bad a big of a deal." Da, 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 da. I had my little mask on,
Oh,
but I was ready to get up out of there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
bet.
like what I told this guy. It's like if I ever get COVID, which I really hope that I don't, because I've also talked to people that have had it, and it's like the worst experience of their entire lives.
Yeah.
like not only physically but also mentally.
Yes.
like it messes with
Well,
you
you
not
think
knowing
you're
if
about
you're
to die.
not knowing if you're gonna live or die, seeing people dying, like people in the like across the hall from you. They're like, "Oh, what happened to Old Man Smithers?" And they're like, "Old Man Smithers is dead."
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
like.
my 90-year-old grandma who's in the nursing home
How's she
with
doing?
COVID, she's
Yeah.
doing good.
She's
Okay,
doing good.
good.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
glad.
For someone who fell, got a brain bleed, and COVID, she's doing pretty good.
She's a fighter.
Yeah,
She
yeah,
is a
that's
fighter,
good.
that's
She's
right.
a fighter.
She is beautiful in every single way.
But COVID can't keep her down. Yeah, that
No, but-
the little
Yeah, what I was saying is
Oh.
if I ever get COVID, which I hope that I don't, but if I ever do, you are gonna see me out in the middle of the street trying to bite people. Like it's gonna be a new side
What?
effect. I hope
You
you
are
guys,
silly.
You guys better put it on TikTok. And
boy,
everything.
whatever.
We're
They
just
will pull
trying-
their gun out, bro. I'm telling you.
COVID gets you shot.
COVID gets
Like,
you right.
Yeah, people will start wearing their mask. I will
Man
take
acting
that.
like
I'll
zombie.
take that
in
bullet for the
sh-
cause.
Athens
He starts
streets.
fighting people. They're gonna
Yeah.
finally
Right.
wear a mask.
Yeah.
No, it's like, and man, I hate that it has to be that way because people don't care. That's the thing. People.
I know. Oh
I'm
god.
trying to ignore it over here. I'm trying to ignore it.
People don't have that apathy, or not apathy. People have a lot of apathy. They don't have empathy.
Empathy.
Yeah.
You know, they don't
yeah.
have
Exactly.
empathy
You're right.
for other people.
You're right. That's so
And-
sad, bro.
And
is so sad.
it's just a humanity thing. It's just a people thing. It doesn't have anything to do with this country in particular. It's hard for one person to think outside of themselves and their inner circle. Their amount of caring gets smaller and smaller as that net gets wider and wider.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
had a guy tell us down in Louisiana, like, yeah, I don't think Biden won. I don't know a single person that would have voted for Biden over Trump.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, in your
In the
little
heart of Louisiana, yeah.
And your tiny red dot of a state. Okay, yeah.
And Trump won your state, so obviously, like,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
true. Like,
So the beginning of I Am Legend, they're interviewing one of the doctors, right? And I
Emma
hope-
Thompson.
Yeah, Emma. Thank you. I was like, what is her name?
Nanny McPhee.
If you've not seen it, spoiler alert, by the way. If you haven't seen it it's 2020, guys, come on.
It's
now.
been like
No,
15
no,
years.
no.
I
He
think it's
literally
okay.
just said that the dog died.
Oh yeah.
do not watch
Spoiler
that
alert.
movie.
Spoiler.
Unless you
alert.
want to cry.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
lot.
Well, in the beginning, they're interviewing a doctor, and it's like a 60 seconds interview, and she's like, "Oh yes, we have had successful
A cure for cancer."
Cure for cancer. Da 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 da." And then like the little title block said, "We cured cancer, but should we have cured cancer?"
Yeah, because the cure for cancer was what turned everyone into those
Those
bloodthirsty
freaking
vampires.
zombies.
Oh lord.
They weren't zombies; they were vampires.
They're vampires.
different.
Really?
Yeah, they're
Different. Yeah, they were
vampires.
vampires.
Because they couldn't come out during
They
the
couldn't
day.
come out during the day. They were
Yeah,
constantly
they were
trying
their,
to like.
they were like their own thing, but they
Yeah.
they were more
Vampire zombies.
Vampires.
They were more
zombies.
vampire than zombie.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that. I'll have to rewatch, and they're like vampires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I think about that every time I see this deal about more
Yeah.
cases and people
Yeah.
not wanting to wear their
No,
masks.
and then like, and I totally understand. I mean, going off of your same
Mm-hmm.
point, what about this vaccine? People are scared because they don't know.
Just don't know.
But at the same time, you've got to trust somebody because you do not know. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I am ignorant when it comes to
Absolutely.
stuff of medical nature. So I put my faith and I put my trust in someone that will know, someone that is
medical
studied.
community. Yeah.
Okay, and I use that word faith, and I really wish I hadn't because that immediately brings up connotations to something else.
Right.
But you have to be able to separate and understand what you're ignorant about, and that's ignorant in like the actual definition. You know, being ignorant doesn't mean that you're stupid. It means that you are unlearned in some things.
Yeah.
You know, I guess untaught. Or I don't know the word. You get what I'm
Ignorant.
saying?
No,
though.
that's what that
Yeah.
is. Ignorant is
You
a
just
lack
don't
of knowledge.
know.
Yeah.
You just don't know something on a particular topic. You need to trust someone that has studied, that has put these hours, that has
Yeah.
done this for 50 years. You
Yeah.
know, like these doctors and these scientists that have been working their entire lives to do this, you need to be able to at least say, oh, that guy may know what he's talking about.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
if I've spent my entire life building aquariums, who are you going to call, me or the guy that just, you know,
I'll
like,
call
you know
you.
what I'm saying?
I'll call you.
So it's like we need to be able to trust people that know what they're doing and be able to put our trust in someone other than ourselves, because at the end of the day, we do not know everything. It's impossible for one person to know everything. So at least trust someone that is specialized in their field.
Which I think then brings us back to, if we have that trust again in things like our medical systems or our government or whatever, that we will have a more empathetic country and a more united country, because right now we're missing that. I think that used to be something, there's a certain amount of trust that the citizens had for large institutions in their country, and we don't have that trust anymore. And it's been so detrimental, you know, and we've become so divided about that and
What do you
about
think
a
that
lot of things.
Did that start in the last 4 years? Like,
No.
No, 'cause I mean, like, and you go back and like using that same example, like the Tuskegee medical trials, those atrocities that happened where people it was infected with syphilis.
Yes,
right?
Tuskegee syphilis studies. Yeah.
Yeah, and so where it was mainly black people. I think
It's all
almost
black people.
entirely
Yeah,
Black
black
men.
people.
all
Yeah, all black men
mainly
that
black
were
men, yeah.
infected with syphilis to see what this did.
Yeah.
And that's not right. You know, I can sit here and say in 2020 that was not right. If I
Yeah,
was
and then
sitting
Bill
here
Clinton came down and formally apologized for it.
Did he?
But that was it.
Well, and we have a
At
lot
that
more
point, it's like,
protections
only
and
better,
systems that you have to go through now than back then. It was just kind of, you could do whatever the hell you wanted to. If you were a doctor, they just let you do whatever you wanted. You didn't even have, I mean, you could just claim
Right,
you were a
and-
doctor. It's like claiming you're a lawyer. You didn't even have to have a law degree, you know,
And
if
I
you pass
think-
the bar.
Yeah, I think that people they're easy to forget stuff that happened in the past, but they're not gonna forget some things. With the Tuskegee trials, that was such, and I think like our word is always egregious. I feel like we say it at
I
least
say
once
it
every
so much.
every
Yeah,
That's
episode.
I say it.
officially
It's
Alex's
definitely-
word.
It's
Yeah,
definitely
that's
one of
how
my
it's
words.
So I'm gonna
Yeah.
borrow your word. It's so egregious because it's like, how could you do that to another human being? Which I guess they didn't view them as
They didn't
human
view them
beings.
as human
They didn't
beings.
do that, and it
Yeah.
was actually under the guise of like the military,
The military,
and the
yeah.
FDA or something like that. And it's just, you're right. I mean, you have to ask yourself, you know,
We trusted the government before. They messed up. They lied to us. They hurt us. They killed us.
yeah.
How are we going to trust them again?
Well, when the FDA has policies, and look this up if you don't believe me, but they have policies like, you know, 0.03% of fecal matter can be found in ground beef.
Yeah.
They're just saying, we don't care. We're just only caring enough so that you don't get sick and then start to sue these guys who are paying us.
Yeah.
That's essentially what that is. So, you know, when you have...
And I'm not, by saying that we need to have more trust in our institutions, I'm not saying that we should blindly trust,
Yeah,
because I think
no
that
carte
is the
blanche.
biggest
Right.
mistake.
At all.
Right.
Is that we have to question. We have to be critical. It's like I tell my students all the time. Even if you agree with something, look for the cracks in that argument.
Yeah.
Look for the things that maybe don't quite sit right, even if you agree with whatever that
That's
is.
good.
Because you have to be critical of things. That's the only way that you can move through life and still be able to make decisions for yourself that keep you safe or that keep you happy or whatever that might be. And that's the same thing. We should always question our government and keep them accountable to what the citizens need and what they want. But there's certain things that, like, there has to be a certain amount of trust when it comes to certain institutions and things like that. And we have to hope and pray that they have our best intentions or have the best intentions, you know? But it's just... There's nothing we can do about a lot of these things
You're
except
right.
try to fix them
Yeah.
on a local or whatever level, or we take to the streets, which we've done a lot of in the last 4
Right,
years. And I
right.
think in a lot of ways that's been very effective. And, you know, I think that was a good thing in most instances that people took to the streets. They were like, listen, we don't like whatever this institutional, you know, blanket is that you've decided, and we disagree, and we're going to tell you we disagree, and that's going to make change,
Yep.
you know, and that's important. And that's, you know, we have to exercise that right as well. We have to be, so I'm not saying blindly trust. I'm saying do your research and trust something if you think that it will work out. Like, for instance, with the vaccine, I have a colleague, I shared this post with you guys. I have a colleague who's a biologist, and he got a trial. He went and got a trial vaccine, and it's either the vaccine or a placebo. He doesn't know, obviously, for the study. But he was saying that, like, long-term wise, this has been through the same system that a vaccine would usually go through, and it is safe because they've ruled out most of the vaccines that would otherwise hurt people.
harm you.
And so for the most part, other than maybe some slight symptoms or something like that, it's safe. And I trust him, because I know him and I know that he's an educated, learned man. And so I would trust what he says. Before that, I was far more worried about this vaccine, and because I didn't know anything about that.
Any connection to
I don't
it.
have any
Yeah.
knowledge about how
Yeah.
vaccinations work,
Right,
about how
right.
the system of
The
how
system,
vaccinations are
right,
created
trial and
works.
error.
I don't know anything about that, but he would know much more about that, and the fact that he is so sure
Yeah.
makes me feel more sure because I trust him.
So there you go, right there. Some transparency would help.
Yes,
Americans
absolutely.
with this.
Absolutely. I think if somebody walked people through what this looks like, on a major news network or
Yeah,
something, it could
they're
go
not-
really
they're
far.
Not doing that, are they?
No, they're not. They're not
Wow.
talking about the vaccine in a practical way. They're talking
Wow.
about it as this thing that might happen,
Might happen.
and then speculating on whether or not it's a good thing, which is like, I'm sorry, but you're sowing distrust.
Yeah.
And that is one thing we don't need in this pandemic moment, is like,
Very interesting.
yeah. But I think that your opinions about not wanting to get a vaccine are valid as well.
I'll say this. I think people who have already had COVID should get the vaccine first. Like, you already had it, like, okay, cool. You've had it. That means you're possibly could be still carrying it. You go get that vaccine. And then tell me how you feel afterwards. It's a 2-part vaccine. Did y'all know that? Yeah, it's 2-part vaccine.
I didn't know
Moderna.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So that's why it's interesting. I read the thing. And so I think there's something to that.
Yeah.
Is if Moderna had a live feed to their vaccine labs and
Yeah.
you saw somebody like trembling or something, you're a lot less likely to get the
Yeah.
5th vaccine.
Yeah, and
Right.
see that's why I'm glad that the UK's already adopted it. Like, it's going to be released to the public
Right,
very soon.
right.
We'll be able to see from here, what happens. And hey, if they all turn into zombies because of the vaccine, we've
We'll
at least
be
got a
ready,
whole ocean.
right. We got a
whole
whole
ocean.
ocean versus,
But I don't obviously I don't
hilarious.
think that's going to happen.
Right.
I hope that everything goes well, but we'll definitely see, because messing with your body chemistry is
It's
so-
serious.
It's serious.
It's serious.
So
No, you have to be really serious when you make those decisions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You-
The flu shot ain't no joke to some
I-
people.
I'm
No.
approaching this vaccine with cautious optimism,
That's good.
because it's like I
Cautious optimism.
want to be like, yes, let's get this vaccine and everything's going to work out, hopefully. Hopefully it works out. We'll see.
Until then, put your GD masks on when you're in
Yes.
public. Just do it
Social
for other
distance,
people.
guys.
Let's do it for other people. Do yourself a favor.
It's not hard to stand 6 feet away from somebody.
Let me help you out. If you've never looked up, let me see, what can you type in? Type in sneeze. Type in just Google somebody sneezing.
Sneeze trajectory.
Trees, thank you. Sneeze trajectory. Just Google it. And Google it like a bunch of times and watch a bunch of different videos. And I promise you,
Watch a bunch of people sneeze.
6 feet will not be enough.
No, it's not. It really is not. They speculate it's up to 27 feet that you can.
Well, that's
spread
why
it
the
to
masks
somebody.
help, because it
Yeah.
stops
But the masks limit that
Boom.
exactly.
Boom.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you say masks don't work, it's you can literally see how
Physically.
that helps.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, there was a video that was going around. It was, again, meme to death. If we're in the era of people only trust their memes.
Yeah.
There's a video that a guy was trying to prove that masks did not work by blowing out a candle with his mask on.
Uh-huh.
He couldn't do it.
Yeah.
No air was coming through.
enough to blow it out.
Yeah, because he was wearing a mask. He was wearing something to stop the stuff in his body from coming out
Doing
to
out.
other bodies.
Right.
It's like it makes sense if you think about
Yeah,
it. Just think
yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah.
But people just don't want to be told what to do because they have freedoms. Or
Listen,
whatever,
if you don't
it's
think
just,
COVID is real, you know the flu is real. You know herpes is real. You know what else can you get if you saliva on somebody else's mouth or something?
Oh, plenty of things.
herpes.
Tons of different things are
Yeah.
real. So if you aren't worried about COVID,
You want
worry
to catch
about
my
that.
diabetes?
You know, yeah, okay, well, that's not necessarily how it works.
I'll give you some
No.
sugar.
Oh, Lord have
Ketar
mercy.
sugar, Cody sugar.
Womp womp.
So I think we've reached the climax,
The
kind of the
ending of our
ending of our
episode.
listen. You know, we got really cynical there at the end, but we're being serious at the same time. This is real. It doesn't matter where the results are coming from, where the statistics or all these different things that media outlets pull together to give us reference numbers. It doesn't matter. It does not matter. One is too many.
Yeah.
Two, because you spit on that person and then they got it. That's gross. Put your mask on.
Put your mask. I'm thinking I'm gonna wear a mask for flu season for the rest of my life.
You know what I'm saying?
I haven't gotten sick this year. I get sick
And
every
masks
year.
are just gonna get more attractive.
Yeah,
They're just gonna
seriously.
have more
Well,
functions.
until it starts giving you acne, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
No,
that
it's
was
just like, yeah. I mean, wait till
that
Clear
mask,
Still
don't
comes
see
out.
it.
Yeah, Clear Still come out with a mask.
Clears
Yeah.
clears
That's
out
right, and
mask.
it'll only the bottom half of your face. which
Then you'll
points.
see the UGG
Oh.
boot wearing
Clean and clear and COVID control.
oh,
got 'em.
plugging it for
Got 'em.
them.
All right, we'll
But,
call them up for a sponsorship soon.
I don't have any action points.
I don't
Oh wait, I have
Fine.
one. I heard it today on a conference call. It was choosing your words carefully with measured emotion is the key to effective communication.
Huh.
Ooh,
I like that.
I really like.
It blew my mind because I'm emotional all the time when I talk.
Yeah, me too. I mean, y'all know that.
Yeah,
And so-
listen to the last episode. I get emotional sometimes.
Yeah.
We all get
yeah.
emotional.
Yeah.
But that was very phenomenal
But
to
to a
me.
communication, I
Yes.
would see why that's so vitally
Yes.
important. Absolutely.
Yes. He said managers are taught not to shoot a rabbit with a cannon.
Yeah.
It's effective, but you don't have any more rabbit.
Right.
So what are you taking home to your family?
Yep.
You don't have any rabbit. You blew it up with a fucking cannon.
Yep.
Be tactile with your reprimand and your takedown and your communication to somebody that you may have a difference with. Originally Spark in the Valley was focused on that, but we had a lot of things to air out first. So 2021 we may get into this more.
I feel like we're definitely going to
seeking
calm
out-
down.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Absolutely. Well,
you know.
I promise you.
We're speaking
I
out
promise you.
bipartisan voices. I mean, we just don't have any right now.
Right.
Yeah, we'll
right.
get some.
Come
We'll
on.
get some.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on.
Have
we
the
wanna hear
conversation
from
with
y'all.
us.
I dare you.
I dare you.
I dare you.
We do dare you because that's what this is about. Stop living in a mindset that is keeping you, your environment, and your country from growing.
Yeah, don't live in a bubble. It's like it is not wrong to listen to somebody that has an opposing point of view than you.
Right.
You may actually learn something.
Right.
You may teach somebody something.
I found out recently that I'm more conservative in my mindsets than I am liberal. I just have a liberal voice about voicing my opinion.
How so?
Fiscally, there's different things about the government that I want smaller. I didn't realize that was a conservative view.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Fiscal conservatives.
Yeah, and just generally smaller government. I do believe that states should have more of a say on what they do, but in terms of education, in terms of economic equity and stuff like that, that should be standardized because there's clearly more people out here who want to see less people empowered, self-empowered,
Right.
than they do not. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my
Yeah.
deal.
My
Sorry,
action
everyone.
point. Julius, get your finger ready for the cuss word button.
Oh, okay.
Wear your fucking mask.
Okay. Now, I don't know if we're gonna bleep that.
No, yeah.
It's
no.
too important.
It's too important.
I've got no action point this week, guys. I'm sorry. I'm falling down on the job.
I got the end of the line. Okay, so my action point has it's very important to me. Please follow our podcast on all social media.
Yes.
Facebook, Instagram. If Google Plus was still a thing, we'd be on Google Plus, but it's not.
Is it not anymore?
I don't know, but
Who knows?
Who uses it?
Exactly.
Hangouts,
Facebook and
Google
Instagram.
Check us out
Hangouts.
on Parlor,
Yes.
Oh,
They're talking about us.
great.
They're talking
our
about us.
OnlyFans.
No, we did share some stuff on social media, at least this past Thursday, and it was, I mean, it took off, and it was really nice to be able to see that engagement. I love that we were able to get some people involved and talking about us and everything, and that was really fun. I'd love to keep seeing that.
Yeah,
So-
don't hesitate. talk crap. If you don't like it, please, like, let's engage in
if
a
you, guys
conversation.
think, if you guys think we're full of shit, then tell us we're full of shit. I would much rather
Come
hear
on.
somebody say something
Yes,
than not hear anybody
then
say
not
nothing.
say anything at all.
You know? So yeah, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook at Spark in the Valley on both platforms.
Yeah.
Listen to us wherever you get your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Casts.
And remember, we
Pocket Cast.
film each of these episodes
And-
and release them as videos on YouTube.
Exactly.
Yes.
So
Yes.
please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and if you can rate and review us, if you like and enjoy our podcast, that really helps us out. It gets us on the charts. It gets more viewers. It gets people who are listening to us. So if you can rate and review our podcast as well, that really helps us out. So please do.
And as always, keep an eye out for that OnlyFans page that will pop up eventually. So I think if that's our action points, I feel like that does it for us today.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
This has been Spark in the Valley.
We'll see you next week.
Bye, sparklers.
Spark in the Valley is a Purple Mountain Pods production. It is hosted by Julius Johnson, Alex Sharp, John Pierre Vasquez, and Cody Hensley. This podcast is produced and directed by Julius Johnson and co-produced by Alex Sharp, John Pierre Vasquez, and Cody Hensley. Music supervising and original music by Cody Hensley. Studio engineering and management by Rob Barnett. Research supervision by Alex Sharp. Social media management by John Pierre Vasquez. Special thanks to McMinn County Democratic Party and the McMinn Young Democrats.